One of the most challenging aspects of being a jewelry designer is pricing your line. Price it too low and you leave money on the table. Price it too high and nobody buys. This guideline will offer you some important information to consider the next time you are choosing prices for your designer jewelry. The first question of pricing is, who do I make this jewelry for? For instance, you can't make jewelry for the average college student, but then price it at a level that only the empty nesting baby boomer with a big bank account could afford. Of course, there are some wealthy college students, but that's not your average college student. So then you're talking about a market that's much narrower in focus. Who you make your jewelry for has an awful lot to do with how you can price it. Make sure that your pricing paradigm and your target consumer are a match. Remember that you don't need all the customers, you just need the right customers. Don't make the mistake of designing for everybody. If you don't know what makes your jewelry special, your customers don't either. And knowing what differentiates your jewelry from everything else in the market has a direct impact on how much you can charge for your line. Make sure you can articulate your difference and then incorporate that thought process into your pricing strategy. If they can't find it anywhere else, they're going to pay a lot more for it. Different types of customers are willing to pay for different things. For instance, a very high-end art collector may pay just as much for a design made of felt as she would for a design made of precious metal, because for that target consumer, the art is the point and the artist is the differentiator. However, for the average jewelry consumer, they are going to focus more on the intrinsic value of the metals and stones that are involved in the jewelry. So think about who your customer is and what they're willing to pay for, whether it's design, whether it's uniqueness, whether it's intrinsic value of the materials. You need to understand this to price your line. It's not recommended that you simply price your products to be consistent with the pricing of your competitors, but you do need to know what people will pay. This means you must pay attention to what's going on in your marketplace. There are a variety of ways to do this. Yes, compare prices to other designers that seem to be designing for the same demographic. You need to understand if you're priced roughly the same, lower, or higher. Talk to your potential customers or your active customers about pricing. Find out what they think is good value. And talk to retailers to whom you might be selling your goods or to whom you are already selling your goods. Don't assume that people are automatically just going to push you for the lowest price. Some people will, of course. But there are business people out there that will share information with you about where they place value. Cultivate those relationships and develop an understanding of what's going on in your market. Looking at pricing from the customer perspective is what we call a top-down approach. We're looking out to the market and seeing what it will support. After you've done that work, it's time to do the bottom-up approach, and that's looking at your production costs and seeing what it costs you to make your jewelry. The first cost category to consider is the cost of the materials to make your jewelry and how much it costs to have those materials shipped to you. The next set of costs to consider is the cost of the tools and equipment necessary to make your jewelry. Now, some of those costs are going to be ongoing, repeatable costs. Some of those costs will be investments, like for something expensive, a laser welder or a casting machine perhaps. Understand both your short-term recurring costs of tools and equipment as well as your investment costs of tools and equipment in order to anticipate how much money you need to get out of your pricing to pay for that manufacturing cost set. Finally, you must understand the cost of your labor to produce each piece. If you are the one producing the pieces, you must affix $1 per hour or $1 per piece value to your time and associate that cost with the pieces you're making. But maybe you're not the person making the piece, or maybe you're not the person making all of the jewelry. Then you should consider whether you're going to hire the labor necessary to make the jewelry or whether you'll be outsourcing that labor. All of those things have different costs. At the end of the day, it's essential to understand what the labor costs per piece for each product in your line. But it's not enough just to know how much it costs you to make each piece. You also have to have a plan for how you're going to track those costs. As you know, the prices of metals and precious gemstones are going to fluctuate over time, sometimes more than others. You need to keep track of those cost changes and monitor your margins. The margin is the difference between your cost and your selling price, to ensure that you continue to make the kind of profit necessary to reinvest in your business and pay yourself a salary. So, how are you going to track your costs? You will need to choose some sort of system to do this. The final consideration in pricing is promotion. How much of a story do you need to tell, and to how many people, to get consumers to start buying your line? If you don't have enough money to do this promotion, ultimately you won't have enough sales either. Remember when I asked you what makes your jewelry line special compared to everyone else's? The heart of promotion is telling the story of your difference. Of course, there will be some people who take a look at your jewelry and just fall in love with it without anyone promoting them with anything other than showing them the jewelry. But those will be the exceptions. For the rest, you need to motivate desire in that person by telling the story and getting the jewelry in front of them. The relationship between your story and your price points is a very strong one. If you're telling a story about youth and thrift and ingenuity, then very high price points are going to seem incongruent with that story. On the other hand, if you're telling a story about very high art and sophistication and quality, but then your price points are too low, people will actually question the validity of your story based on your price points. So your story and your price points have to be consistent with one another. For those of you who sell through retail dealers, part of your investment in promotion will be the investment in teaching the retail sales staff how to sell your line. Don't ever assume that just because your jewelry is in their store that they're committed to it and are excited to be selling it. You need to cultivate champions within each retail environment and teach them how to sell your line. Convey to them your passion for your line and your story and create brand advocates out of them. And that does not come for free. Pricing is probably the most left brain, right brain thing you will ever do. It's based on hard facts, what your products cost to make, what your products cost to ship, what it costs you to promote and market your products, as well as awareness of who your customer is and what stories matter to them and what price points are most consistent with the story you've chosen. And then pricing is also a matter of observation. Once you put prices to your product, you have to carefully observe the market and see how they're responding and tweak it over time. Some people like to say that pricing is a science, but pricing is both art and science. And as appealing as it might be to hand off the pricing to someone else, pricing is far too strategic an activity to let anyone else do it for you. Using all of the elements we've discussed so far, it is important for you, the designer, to master the art of pricing. There are plenty of books and consultants and articles that will give you a perfect formula for pricing. But formulas alone won't get you where you need to be. Your goal is to price your product so well that the sales are brisk and consumers are responsive, but that you have enough money to pay all your expenses and enough left over to keep a profit for the business and reinvest in your business. And a formula alone isn't the answer. I like to suggest to jewelry designers that you go for a minimum of 2 times markup at wholesale, and I prefer to see you get a 3 to a 3.5 time markup at wholesale. If you're truly differentiating and providing a product with value, your retailer should still be able to mark it up 2.2 to 2.5 times on top of that, and everybody makes money. Now, If once in a while your costs go down or you make a great opportunity buy on some components, don't just drop your price. The consumer and the wholesale dealer don't know that you just got a great deal. You're not going to get any price resistance. And it's certainly not wrong to keep the additional margin for yourself. That's just a little bit more money in the bank to allow you to continue to reinvest in your business so you can give that retailer and their consumer the great products they want on an ongoing basis. So you can't keep making exciting new products for your customers if you don't have profits to reinvest in your business. So don't be shy about pricing. Get what you can get up to the point where, and not beyond where, you experience consumer resistance. So in closing, these are the three main components of pricing. Perception, both your perception of who your target customer is and their perception of you and your story and your jewelry and your price points relative to that story. Production, what it costs you to make your jewelry, and promotion, how you're going to get that story out there so that consumers know about your jewelry. Do these things right and you'll achieve profit, and that's always a good thing.